Rick and Morty. Any Rick and Morty fans in the house? I enjoy the show, but I would say I'm not exactly a hardcore fan in that I can't, quote the thing, and I don't know the names of absolutely everyone who's involved. But I did like it the few times that I've seen it. I binged it once at a cottage, so I'm not like totally green. But as you may be aware, Rising from the Last War, the Eberron Compendium, is in good company on Tuesday as the Rick and Morty box set also drops on the same day. Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty launching next Tuesday, November 19th. Again, I'll preface this, we mentioned earlier, but it is not a starter set. So it is not a starter set. It's not really intended for the faint of heart. It really is geared towards Rick and Morty fans. And it's a very different Dungeons and Dragons campaign experience. And here's why. First of all, it was fashioned obviously after, or at least from the spirit of the Adult Swim series animated hit Rick and Morty. The comic that originally kind of spurred this was called Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons. That was penned by Patrick Rothfuss, who we mentioned earlier, and creator Jim Zub, a fellow Toronto boy, and the art by Troy Little. So when they announced or launched or built this Rick and Morty box set, they flipped the script a little bit. It's called Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty to accentuate that, the game is now coming to the IP rather than the other way around. The set is co-authored by Jim Zub and Kate Welch from Wizards of the Coast. And art, of course, still done by Troy Little. So there's new custom art in the vein of Rick and Morty. Fans of the series, I'm sure, will enjoy that. It's intended for up to 5 players. That's kind of a hard cap. So, other box sets, you've got like Lost Mines of Phandelver, the D&D Essentials set. They are a little bit more flexible, right? You create a character, you go in, you can have 4 players, 5 players, 6 players. It's malleable. This one is actually built for 5 players, or up to 5 players, I would say, but not beyond. And intended to take players from level 1 to 3. It includes a 32-page original adventure, which is called The Lost Dungeon of Rickness. It's a play on the old LMOP, the first box set. The Lost Dungeon of Rickedness, Big Rick Energy is the name of the campaign adventure here. Like I said, intended for 5 players, level 1 to 3. It comes with a 64-page rule book, complete with annotation from the character Rick Sanchez. So they've peppered out throughout the rule book various flavors and tones of the character Rick, which are pretty funny. So it's got a little bit of a comic play maybe. Obviously comes with a 4-panel DM screen. It comes with pre-made character sheets. So this is where we get into the player limitations. So it's designed for up to 5 players. There are 5 pre-made characters that are built in the spirit of the show. So that's why you are a little bit funneled into those 5 characters. It's not the kind of scenario where you jump in, make your own character, and like I said, your traditional organic Dungeons and Dragons experience, right? So it comes with a full dice set, which I really like. So by full dice, I mean it's got 11 dice, right? So you've got 3d6s, your 2d20s, 2d10s, your percentile dice, and all the other, your d12, d4. What is that? How's my math check out too? 4. Yeah. It's got all the dice. Let's leave it at that. It's got all the dice for you. It's just in time, obviously, for the return of Rick and Morty to the screen with season 4 launched, I think, on the 10th this week. So again, really speaking to fans in this series, their timing is impeccable as it's lined up there. It's got your typical general chaos and brash humor that is indicative of the show. It's really a hilarious and kind of sensibility-free, I'll say, experience in the DM platform, for lack of a better word, because it's really not D&D. I think that's the key. It's not D&D as you might know with a Rick and Morty skin. It's a Rick and Morty game with D&D flair. I think that's probably the best way to put it. There's a great focus on hilarious characters, obviously, and the weird, insane things that they can get up to and are faced with that they get into, and blindly, ridiculously changes that can spring up throughout the course of the adventure. So it's really about like pranks, jabs, and digs, not just like to the characters, but between one another and in the game world. Basically providing hours of these kind of zany chaos where the DM just gets to really torment, screw with the players. And I didn't really know what this meant until I looked into it a little bit closer. It really equips the Dungeon Master to throw crazy stuff at the players, and the players get to mess with each other too. So it does seem like a pretty kind of fun romp that way. But again, it's important to know what you're getting into. We'll blow that out in just a minute. So the there are also these really cute quips and quirks throughout the book where Rick will inject his tips for you. Like there's a couple I pulled out. Make their butt cheeks clench in fear every time you look in their direction, and force them to jump through pointless hoops for your own entertainment. These are actually tips that are scribed into the piece. So kind of really just saying what we're all thinking as DMs, I think. Isn't that fair? There's more about the dynamic of messing with your players throughout the game, so it's much more it's much more theme park and railroady. So we want to know what we're getting into if you're looking at running this or picking it up. It does follow the humor and spirit of the show, obviously, and all its kind of travesty. It doesn't have like deep sweeping storylines or meaningful relationships. That's not really the spirit of the show, and you won't find that in this adventure if that's what you're looking for. Like I said, it's more about that dynamic of messing with your fellow players and the DM messing with your players. It's a lot more railroady. It's a lot more guided. They do the ideas for the players to use the pre-made characters that come with the set, and it's not a story-driven, personalized experience. So if you are going to run this, I would say make sure that you're setting that expectation with your players before you get too far downfield. And the social contract in this, I think, includes the assumption that you're embodying a persona from the Rick and Morty world to play through a campaign in their world by their rules. I think that's probably the best way that I would table it. So Rick and Morty coming out on Tuesday, November 19th. If you're a Rick and Morty fan, if you're down with that, it should be a good time and you should enjoy it. Just make sure that your characters aren't coming in expecting an organic, malleable, customized Dungeons and Dragons experience.